It being roughly 6:30 on April 9th, I'm going to start the zoning board of appeals off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. The first order of business is a petition, Zero Westport Lakes Road, continued hearing on an application of Pine Ridge Estates LLC in Bradford, Dean for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, for development off Westport Lakes Drive consisting of 38 single-family housings on individual lots which are to contain 2 or 3 bedrooms, with 10 of those homes being designated as affordable deed-restricted homes. Subject property is located at 0 Westport Lakes Road and is shown on Assessor's Map 31, lots 3B, 3C, and 4G. Voting on this will be Jerry Coutinho, myself, Roger Menard, Ray Elias, Cynthia Kazekowicz, and George Stelgis. Like I said, this is a continuation, and we're going to focus mostly on groundwater efforts, correct?
Sure. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. We also have our attorney, George Pucci, with us, and we have our consultant with us. You can state your name, please.
Brian Dunn with MBL Land Development and Permitting with offices at 5 Bristol Drive in southeastern Mass.
Right, okay. So, I know that our consultant has reviewed your groundwater efforts. I'll give you the option. You want to summarize what
Sure.
your effort, and then I'll have our consultant then give his comments. And I assume that he passed them on to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sure. Thank you. And again, Christopher Agostino, counsel for the applicant, here tonight with Paul Cusson, the applicant's consultant, and the engineering team, Christian Farland and John Marchand, as well as the applicant's representative. We were last before the board on February 19th, if you recall. It hasn't gotten much warmer since then, but we're back here now. And since that time, if you recall, shortly before that hearing, the applicant submitted a plan set dated February 13th, which was its most recent iteration. And MBL didn't have a chance to fully vet that plan set or complete a full peer review for the hearing on February 19th, but we did discuss some preliminary civil design considerations that the parties were going to address through their engineering peer review process after that. So with an eye towards that, MBL received the February 13th plan set and prepared a detailed peer review analysis that was dated March 18th. And we received a copy of that. And in the ordinary course, you're, I'm sure, all familiar with the way those peer review analysis work. The engineer doing the peer review does a bullet-by-bullet analysis of anything they think is something that should be addressed in a new iteration of the plans. And so we were able to receive that, and we had already gotten started in providing additional detail and addressing a few of the items that we had discussed on February 19th from a preliminary perspective. If you recall, we discussed the turning radiuses for the biggest piece of equipment for the fire department. We discussed the proximity of the individual water wells that are going to service each home to off-site septic systems. We discussed the fact that the plans didn't yet at the time have a surveyor stamp on them. And so we also discussed at a very high level a seemingly conflicting design for the stormwater management system relative to the soil analysis that was put in the plans. So we were able to get ahead of those issues and really take a closer look at them following that February 19th meeting. And when we received the March 18th plan set, we were already kind of ahead of the game. So the next iteration was based on the initial comments and the March 18th review. We were able, and through our engineering team, prepared a March 28th revision. So that March 28th revision addresses everything that was discussed at the last hearing on February 19th, everything that was, or as many items as we could, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but it addressed everything that was described in that March 18th peer review. And we submitted that with a letter that I emailed to the board, and I uploaded the plans on April 2nd. So we were hoping to get that latest iteration to MBL with a little bit of a buffer before tonight, so maybe they could take a look at it and see whether or not they were able to check off a few additional items from that March 18th peer review. But in that context, I think, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. It's appropriate tonight for MBL to present that March 18th review, which is really the most broad, in-depth review of the overall plans. And recall, he wasn't ready to do that on February 19th when we had the last hearing. But now that he's had a chance to look at the plans, I think it's appropriate for MBL to present its review. And to the extent MBL had a chance to look at the March 28th revision, maybe Mr. Dunn can cross off a few more items that were still open on March 18th. And then from there, Farland Engineering is prepared to present to the board the changes that were described or provided in that March 28th plan set. So the plan set currently before the board is the March 28th revision. And as you'll see throughout the process, the plan will continue to evolve, but the goal is to cross off one by one MBL's comments that remain as open. And you'll see tonight that even in that plan set, or even in that review, several of the items have already been marked as resolved. So that's the goal, is to close out as many of those as possible throughout the hearing process. Another element that was submitted, and we'll talk about that more as the hearing progresses, is the waiver list. And as the plans become more refined and specific engineering issues are identified as far as the details of the stormwater management system, the details of septic disposal on site, because there is an on-site septic system proposed. And I know the board received some back and forth from the Board of Health. But we did submit an updated waiver list that identifies specific local bylaws and local regulations that are implicated by the most recent plan revision. So we submitted a more detailed iteration of that. That's going to continue to evolve as the hearing progresses. But that's one more item that was included in that April 2nd submission that we sent over to the board. So with that, we can turn it over to the engineers. I do think, I recall at the last hearing we had mentioned that we wanted to ensure we have a quorum throughout. And I just wanted to make sure you announced the voting members. Is it a consistent group, or is there anyone missing tonight?
Yes, yes, Constance is missing.
Okay, and is this her first hearing that she's missed, so she can,
As long as she watches the video, she can
Mullen,
still
okay.
be a voting member.
So, and I'm sure counsel for the board's kind of tracking these as well, and we'll do our best to make sure we track those
You did
points.
mention, we sent you the analysis, well, the work done by the health department. Have you had a chance to look at that, or is that still something ongoing?
Yes, we did look at it. I reviewed it with Farland Engineering. Tonight, I think we'll get into overall general civil. If the board has specific questions tonight on waivers,
I think like the next meeting is going to be probably, or at least, well, we have at least one or two meetings left that we need like one whole meeting just because there's a whole list of waivers.
Yeah.
It's going to take like,
Well,
pretty much a meeting to go.
I think if we get ahead of it this evening, it really comes down to nitrogen loading, nitrogen sensitivity, and, whenever you're dealing with septic disposal proximate to water bodies and wells, it's all about nitrogen. And we actually did discuss it with the engineer, and as it turns out, our plans are compliant with the state requirements for nitrogen protection and nitrogen loading, and there is nitrogen removal features in the proposal. So we can certainly address those. I don't think, and we can discuss the waiver list and continue to see that evolve, but this board is charged with determining whether or not there are local concerns or unique local site-specific issues that would require denial of a waiver request. And where the waivers that the Board of Health was mentioning really come down to nitrogen loading, and we can show that there are no nitrogen-specific concerns. This isn't in a wellhead protection zone. It's not a public water drinking supply. We can show appropriate separation to wells, and we can show that the local regulations that the Board of Health referenced in their letter do not rise to the level of something that qualifies as a critical local concern. But we can certainly, yeah, absolutely. And we can certainly, maybe tonight towards the end, we can discuss overall stormwater and overall civil site design. And then maybe we can toss around, similar to what we did at the last hearing, we can identify specific concerns. I know some board members have had a chance to really dig into the plan set. So if there are specific concerns, maybe we can prepare a specific letter that describes the waivers that we're requesting from the Board of Health bylaw and why those waivers are appropriate. And again, ultimately, in these discussions, it's all about whether the board or the consultant for the board identifies a critical local concern that would necessitate upholding a local bylaw where we're requesting a waiver. So certainly, there's further discussion on that topic.
Right, okay. All right,
But I think, good, if we can turn it over to MBL.
yes. So can you give us a summary of, well, a summary, I mean,
Okay, so-
it's a very lengthy,
Yeah, so a couple of things, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So we received another package of information, revised plans, I think it was April 3rd, with an updated waiver request, a new set of site plans. So that was like last Thursday or Friday. So we really haven't had a chance to look at all of that stuff in great detail. However, as we demonstrated at the last meeting, there's a design flaw in the way that the engineers have determined their drainage study and how they're using, as we want to call it, the C and D type of soils. So if you have C and D type of soils per the soil survey, you use infiltration to the extent practical. However, we have test pits and perk test data that say something totally different. So when that is the case, you have to comply with the infiltration and recharge requirements of the stormwater rules and regulations of the state, which is a Conservation Commission, type of review. However, it's in front of you right now, so in order for them to go from here to the conservation, they have to show compliance with the Wetland Protection Act and those stormwater rules and regulations. One thing that could be done is if they went along with the infiltration rates of either the B material that has been identified and certified by the engineers, they could use infiltration and recharge, make their basins possibly smaller, and stay 50 feet away from the wetlands. But they're choosing not to. However, in their response that we just got last week, they're saying that whoever did the soil evaluation earlier on didn't have enough experience. However, Farland Engineering is the engineer and the engineer of record certifying the information on the plans, which they already have done that. So it's kind of hard to say, I don't want to do the recharge and I don't want to do the infiltration for this type of design because of the soil survey mapping. The soil survey mapping, if it is C&D, it's up to a competent professional to make the determination of the soils that are on the ground or in the ground, and then come back with a competent design based on that, and not throw out that you have better soils in 6 inches of 6-inch perk rate or 8-inch perk rate with sandy loam and loamy sand determined, where even the Board of Health witnessed these test pits. So it's very hard to throw that data out and say, no, we're not going to follow that, or no, we're not going to use that. So based on their review letter, that they, in their responses, they're all already saying that they need to do more confirmatory test pits on-site to make sure that it's a B soil or a C soil, which should be done. And we've discussed this in our letters twice already, that, you know, we think that that should be done. Farland Corporation is saying that they want to do that, and they're going to plan on doing it the month of April. So that information should be done, should be documented, and then their plans updated to show conformance with the stormwater rules and regulations of the state. So I think that that's where this project needs to start. Also, in regards to the Board of Health letter, I mean, I just received them this evening. I read through them. They're recommending denying the waiver of in lieu of test pits. So that's a requirement of Title V in the primary area of the septic system and the reserve. So there are areas on the other side where there's reserve areas of the septic system that don't have all of the test pit data that is needed per Title V. So I think that that's where the Board of Health is trying to explain in their letters today. Like I said, I just read them this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, can you go through like your comments on your review on March 28th?
So on March 28th, so they did do, so comment number one, they did provide a PLS stamp on the survey plan. You know, however, when you get to the lotting plan that they provided, they didn't provide the, you know, it's kind of difficult to tell the professional land surveyor to do the job a certain way. However, if you're going to record a lotting sheet, it has to have certain certifications on it. It has to have a registry block and things like that. I mean, we didn't get into that kind of detail, but that's missing. So they can't even record the plan. Also, there's another 117 acres to the north of this property. So what Farland Corp has done in their lotting plan has just drawn a line down at the end of the development, but kind of forgot about the rest of it. So when you subdivide and you say, I'm going to carve out this, and you have 117 acres remaining over here, in order to record the plan, you have to say what's left and what's remaining, even if it's under the same ownership. So some type of a plan needs to be prepared that shows what's happening with the existing 117 acres. It's just not going to sit there. So that information needs to be put on like a Form A plan or an 81X plan, something like that. There's the demolition plan. We talked about the demolition and erosion control plan. I don't know what happened on the new set of plans, but there's no existing contours on that one. Number 13, like I said, there's no certifications on the plans or the registry block or anything like that for recording. Number 14, really the same comments above that I just mentioned about the certification. Number 15 was that the stationing had been added to the plan. That's great. Number 16, we recommended the structural engineer review the retaining wall, and they're saying that they want to, move that as a condition of approval. I think that the retaining wall should be designed because it's a small block wall, and there's possibly going to be some type of a grid associated with it to hold it up. So that really should be on the plans. Let's see, number 17, the curb ramps have been added to the plan. However, there's a label for a curb ramp in the middle of a building. So I don't know why that's like that. They've added the radius, number 18, they've added the radiuses to the plan. Let's see, number 19 is about the parking spaces in the mailbox. So the radiuses have been added to the plan as we had requested. They added, number 26, they added the easement in between two of the houses. and the lotting plan was stamped by the PLS, so, yeah, that's been taken care of, but like I said, you can't record it. So it needs to be revised once again. Number 27, they're saying that they're gonna go out and do additional test pits to confirm the soils and the groundwater. It was said later on in the letter, it would be done sometime in April. We're recommending that someone from my office be there to witness the data and also take samples of the soils and the conditions and have them tested as well. That's a recommendation. Number 32, we've talked about showing all of the proposed development design for Golf View Lane. That's been added to the plan, but I also want to make note that that doesn't mean that what's shown on the plan is really what's supposed to be built. It should be built per the original subdivision plan, just in case there's any differences. Number 33 talks about some sewer manhole information missing. Says that they've been updated. So we just have to take a look at that again. So number 34 talks about the utility plans and requesting, that we make sure that there's no issues of crossing drains and sewers at the same time. We did request a plan and profile, but we got pushback on that. Number 35 talks about the underground utilities have been shown on the plans, so on and so forth. And we're saying that this information should be provided on the final set of plans before your approval. Number 37 talks about the profiles that I just discussed. They're asking for a waiver on that. Number 41 talks about the plan showing gas, but there's no gas out in this area, so they removed that from the plan, so that's been done. Subdivision rules and regulations, number 1, comment number 1. A waiver has been submitted, should be submitted for the regulations for section 3B2. We hadn't received an updated letter at the time, but the waiver request letter, I think, says that now, the new one. Number 2, on the regulations, we propose street names to be labeled on the plans. They've been labeled on the plans, but I think that we also would like to have signs placed at the streets and the intersections. So that should be updated on the plans as well. Number 4, should be noted the applicant has submitted a waiver request for this section, which is section 3B3H. But the plans really should be dimensioned to show all the lot areas and not with plus or minus. Based on the review today, they've addressed that in their plans. So they took off the plus or minus. Number 5, comment, section 3B3I. The plans do not show bearings and distances of the proposed lots, roadways, and all the proposed lots, or where the north is referenced from. The plan should be revised, so on and so forth. They did update a lot of the bearing and distances, but I think I saw at least one that was still missing today. But like I said, Mr. Chairman, that was just a quick review today. They did stamp and sign the lotting plan. Number 8, section 3B3M, the plan and profile of proposed roadway showing the center line, roadway geometry and elevation should be provided. As of 3/18, no updated waiver request had been received and no updated plans, but now they're requesting a waiver from them. However, usually, bless you, when you do a subdivision, you do a plan view on the top and you do a profile of everything that goes under the ground. It's really standard operating procedure for a subdivision plan. Number 10, section 4A3B, not enough design information is shown of proposed roadway intersections to know if the requirements of the section are met. Profiles showing the proposed grading should be provided with labels of all high points, low points, so on and so forth. So we can see the vertical curves and to make sure that they've been designed properly. As of the 18th, no waiver request was submitted, but as of last week, a waiver request was submitted. So that'd be another waiver that you'd have to review and discuss, Mr. Chairman. On comment number 12, section 4B1, no easements are shown in the proposed drainage lots 9, 10, and 18. I think I mentioned this earlier. The easements have been added and stamped by the PLS, but that, we'll have that come out with the final review of the updated information that we have. Comment number 13 on section 5B6, section requires a 5x5 bounds be installed at all street angles, bearings, and ends of curves and all intersections. This information is now on the plans, but no waiver has been requested. So, no updated waiver was requested, but I think that in the new information, there is a waiver to not install all the bounds. That's another waiver you'll have to request and discuss. 14, section 5CF, a fence shall be shown around the proposed detention basins. The fence has been proposed around the basins, and fences should be labeled, including the heights and material, and gates should be provided for basin maintenance and emergency access. Fences have been labeled on the heights of the material have been added, and gate access has also been called out in the plans, but I haven't had a chance to double check that one. Comment 16 is section V, section 5D2, standard 11 requires the volume of the stormwater discharge of the 10-year storm shall not increase to pre-development conditions. In the stormwater report, the applicant states that they met this requirement by demonstrating a reduction in peak volumes of the 10-year storm. The reduction was calculated by subtracting the volume contained within each basin from the study point that the basin discharged from the study point volume of the 10-year storm. The calculation is erroneous as the volume runoff of that is contained within each basin already and accounted for in the study. So another item that needs to be addressed. And if they change their design to be an infiltration basin and recharge, then they would just do a mounding analysis and a lot of this would go away. The other thing is they're asking for a waiver of this regulation due to the C&D material that's in the soil conservation mapping. So you start there as engineers. You look at what the Soil Conservation Survey did in the 1950s and 60s and said where all the different soils are. So they start with C&D material. However, you still have to recharge and infiltrate to the extent practicum. So based on the soils that were dug in the ground, witnessed by the Board of Health, and certified, they're saying there's loamy sand and sandy loam and actually gravel and with cobbles and stones. So it's very hard not to say, based on that data, that they can't infiltrate and recharge. So it would be a recommendation of our office that Farland follow that regulation in the stormwater rules and regulations to show compliance with the recharge requirement of the state regulations under the stormwater rules and regulations. So, and that can be further confirmed with witnessing the additional test pits and also witnessing the other perk tests and soil evaluation that the Board of Health is requesting in their letters to follow Title V for the septic systems in the reserve areas. We just can't only do them in certain areas and say that's good enough and say I'm going to use this as a reserve and not have the test pit data associated with that reserve area. So that's that's kind of like a big one. It still is a big one. Number 18 is section 5G2, proposed gas and electric cable, television, wires, and all other services except for transformers, so on and so forth, and no information was shown on the plans. So, and then they put gas on the plans when there's no gas service out there to tie into. So that didn't make any sense. So as of 3/18, it still should be shown on the final plans. And then, as of last week, Farland Corp. is recommending that the final layout of the underground electric and cable and telephone utilities and providers be provided as a condition of approval. There should be some understanding of what kind of utilities they want to show on the plans to serve these homes. So I think that really shouldn't be a recommendation of approval. It should be something that should be shown on the plans. Comment number 19, section 5, I3A, proposed water tank shall be of a watertight fiberglass design. The proposed 10,000-gallon water tank detail shown is of precast concrete. The plan should be revised to conform to the regulations, or a waiver should be requested. And Farland Corp. responded on 2/13. The proposed water tanks have been reviewed and approved by the Westport Fire Department. A waiver of the section has been requested. And then, as of 3/18, no waiver request had been provided, but as of last week, a waiver request was provided. So that's another one that the board will have to discuss. On to compliance with the Town of Westport Local Septic System Regulations, Title V, and the Massachusetts Private Well Guidelines. Comment number 1, it appears that no perk tests were performed in either of the test pits located within the septic system reserve area in the area of TP 2207 and 2208. Based on the soil logs provided on the site plans that we reviewed, it is recommended that any perk tests required by the Board of Health are performed to ensure that no additional waivers from local regulations, since there is a 30-minute inch perk rate maximum allowable in this town. And then, as of 3/18, the applicant has asked for a blanket. Every single Board of Health rules and regulation, not itemizing. They want the whole thing waived. So I think that in your discussions about waivers, it should be very, very specific. But I think that once you review and read the Board of Health's letters into the record, you'll see that they're asking you not to waive any of their regulations. Recharge. We talked about recharge at length, and I think that we were very, very clear to the applicant and the applicant's engineer about the use of C&D soils in their drainage analysis. So the big thing and the takeaway from our comment about that is that therefore, okay, let me start at the top. So comment number 1, standard 3 of the Mass State Rules and Regulations as they relate to stormwater. Standard 3 is recharge. The proposed project to recharge stormwater to the maximum extent practicable, as the site is comprised of solely C&D soils based on the NRCS soil survey. However, the Mass Stormwater Handbook requires that soil conditions are verified on site at the location where the recharge is proposed and assigned a hydrologic soil group at each recharge location. Based on the test pit data and the detail sheet, one test was performed within each basin, which is loamy sandy soils, were observed in each test pit. Loamy sand soils are suitable for groundwater discharge. Therefore, recharge should have been provided for this project utilizing Rawls rate for loamy sand, and MBL recommends that the applicant perform witness test pits in each of the basin to provide groundwater recharge per the Mass Stormwater Handbook. So, but with that information, this is not an end-all. This is not a deal killer. Based on what we do at our office, having infiltration and recharge makes our basins possibly smaller. So this is kind of like a good thing. So I don't know why they want to push back and not do this. However, their letter of last week says that they're going to do the tests. So I want to make sure that we get out there and we do the tests and we witness the testing, we log the materials, we agree on the materials, and then we also have the materials tested to come up with an infiltration rate. And then that's what the design engineer should use. So I think that, the other statement and their comment on that, you can read their letter. I was a little taken back by one of their responses about the person who did the original soil testing and the Board of Health that witnessed those tests. So you can read that for yourself. Some new comments that we had, well, this is on the newer stuff, but we can get to that after we review the new information
Newest version, yep.
that we received, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see here you're ready to do.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just help to frame the issues a little bit. You heard a lot from MBL with some editorialization as to the back and forth. I think a lot of what was described will likely be resolved just as a matter of course when the next iteration of the plans are reviewed. I just wanted to point out a few things, and then obviously I'm going to turn it over to Farland just to explain the situation with the soils and the infiltration and the stormwater. But there were several comments about a plan that's ready for recording. These plans that the board would approve out of this process are not to be recorded. They're still preliminary plans, and then we have to go and ultimately get Board of Health approval, Conservation Commission approval, other state approvals, and then we come back to the board, at which point things like a place for the board to endorse the final plan set and have it in form suitable for recording would finally be done. But there were several comments in here that reference things that really would be for the final approval process. And I really think they're in the ordinary course. And, I heard Mr. Dunn describing them. And I know, in fairness to him, he only had about a week to review these at this point. So he hasn't really done a full dive on them. But I think once his team looks at it and realizes exactly what the process and procedure is, we'll see that, things like this, or most of these are resolved. But as far as the soil analysis, I'm going to turn it over to Christian, who will explain. And that really is, if I could frame it, that is a sort of threshold question that needs to get resolved, which is why ultimately the engineer, the professional engineer on the development team concurs with the proposal to say, let's go back out and confirm this, because we really do think that the C and D loomy sand characterization in the soil logs in the soil logs was inaccurate, a mistake, or whatever it was, but we're going off of our professional engineers' experience in the town of Westport and experience with how to deal with stormwater in Westport. So it's a Westport-specific design, which is why we're not proposing to do infiltration, which is why we're proposing the detention, and we agree we'll confirm it. So that's actually something that came out of the last hearing. It was an engineer in training, a young engineer that doesn't have a lot of experience necessarily in Westport, so I certainly wouldn't be taken aback by that. I'm not sure I agree with that. It's a fair characterization. People pay for experience. There's a lot that goes into experience, and You know, things like that are ultimately checked by a professional engineer, which both of our representatives here are, and ultimately they're going to stamp the plan. So if they're not comfortable taking the word of an EIT that graduated recently, and nothing against that person at all, but I certainly would go with experience and a professional engineer's stamp at the end of the day. And Christian can talk more about how he arrived at, you know, what the plan is to confirm the soils. And the plan is to confirm the soils in the ordinary course. We'll have the Board of Health witness the soils. And if a representative from MBL that is a certified soil examiner, I'm sure there's somebody on the team that's
I think we have 10 of them.
certified soil examiner, you know, we don't need 10 out there, but if, you know, somebody for the board, but we don't need to turn this into, you know, a hunt to find some intricacies, because we are dealing with experience here ultimately. So, Mr. Farland, can...
Before you do that, yeah,
Sure.
I just want to clarify one thing. That, Attorney Pucci, I'm still confused about this level of drawings. I sort of get the impression that out of this, what the attorney is saying is that we sort of get in-process drawings rather than certified stamped drawings. In your experience, what do you generally get out of a 40B project at this point?
Yeah,
I mean, from the zoning board part of this.
the process does call for more preliminary type plans than the type of plans you'd get for a building permit, say, on. And the reason for that is you have a process that, you know, the statutory scheme is meant to encourage affordable housing, so they don't want to put developers through the time and expense of getting to a final plan set and then getting denied or having conditions that are unacceptable. So the process and the regulations do contemplate a preliminary type of plan situation. But having said that, that doesn't mean that they don't have to comply with information that an engineering professional says needs to be on there so that you can make a reasoned decision on it. So what I took from the peer reviewer comments, and I may have them wrong, is he's not saying that they're, you know, he's objecting to the final stage, that it necessarily can't be recorded, but more so that there's crucial information needed on those plans for you to make a reasoned decision. But I may have that wrong on the recording situation. Need to speak to that particular one?
What I'm referencing is if we're creating lots, and we're gonna deed lots, okay? And you have to record that plan at the registry of deeds. A Mylar has to be created. It also has to have a registry block on one of the corners. That's, you know, 2.5 by 2.5, and there's a bunch of certifications that need to be placed on that plan for recording.
But at what stage is that done at? Is that done as part of, and the other thing, and you mentioned, I mean, eventually, we're going to get to the point where you're either going to make a decision to grant or reject. And once we grant it, then you go off and do,
We go to the Board of Health. We
well,
go-
that's not really, talking with Attorney Pucci, that's not really the way it works.
Well, it is, because, so the Board of Health, for instance, actually issues your wastewater disposal permit, your septic works permit. So they sit in a state capacity. So they don't review local bylaws. It is, the ship has sailed as far as the nitrogen waiver things. So if this board determines that they're okay waiving the local nitrogen bylaw, the Board of Health can't deny us a permit based on the local nitrogen bylaw.
If we grant the waiver.
If you grant the waiver, correct. But they still have to adjudicate compliance with Title V, with the state bylaw,
Okay.
and unwaived local bylaws, if there are any unwaived, and the requirements of the plan. So we have to go to them and ultimately show that we're entitled to the wastewater disposal permit, the construction works permit for the actual septic system. But it's whether or not they get to deny that based on local bylaws. So that's the adjudicate. Same thing for the Concom. The Concom sits in a state capacity. And in a state capacity, they adjudicate compliance with the
With the state
state bylaw. But if you waive local bylaws, they can't say, hey, we have a 100-foot setback. But we still do have to go to them. So if they determine that there's some noncompliance with state, or if the Board of Health determines there's some noncompliance with the state Title V, then we'd have to change our plans, and when we come back to the board for endorsement of final plans, things might have moved around. So that's your second bite at the apple. It's really when we go to comply with state law, whether there are revisions. Ultimately, there's no lotting plan that's coming out of this process. That's when the board finally endorses, and there will be a stamped endorsed plan at the end, but it's not this plan set.
Roger, yeah.
I was gonna get back to
Question
you.
over here, and we're kind of straying. So, and what I meant with you when I said, they're not gonna, there is no further approval process of Board of Health or anybody else. I'm talking about your local regulations.
Okay.
So that's here.
Okay, so you-
You're
you-
not- That's what I'm talking about. They're not going anywhere else on that stuff
For local,
for local.
but they have to go to them to
State
make sure they
approvals-
comply with state
They have to get their
requirements.
state approvals from any jurisdictional board that has the jurisdiction over the state issues.
Okay.
So if they have Conservation Commission with Wetlands Protection Act, they have to go to Conservation Commission. If you have a more local restrictive bylaw, however, wetlands bylaw, you have to impose. that.
I got it, okay.
Same thing for Board of Health stuff.
Right, right.
And on the question about the plan, this is why I asked the peer reviewer, what I'm saying about the issue of preliminary plans, the process does, and the regulations are clear, they are allowed to have a certain preliminary type of plan before you to get an approval for that you would condition. But they have to be to the degree of, the degree of engineering information on there or other technical compliance issues so that you can make a reasoned decision on it. So if they haven't reached that level of detail, that's not enough. So I'm trying to explain to you where that fine line is.
Yes, yeah.
Between a preliminary plan and something that's appropriate for you to act on. And that's what I'm saying. If this particular issue about a recordable plan, that's just some further information later that can be specified, well, they have to put X, Y, Z on these to make them recordable plans, that's fine, that's one thing. But if the peer reviewer is saying, no, there's crucial information missing
Right, right.
that you need to
It's the
make your
content,
decision,
not
then they-
necessarily the,
Right,
crossing the i's and dotting the t's.
exactly.
Can
Okay.
Brian answer
The other thing I want to get, when we, again, either reject or grant, I mean,
And you can
You
grant
come-
with conditions too.
yeah, and there'll always be conditions, but you mentioned you come back to see us again
Yes.
when you have final drawings. So what's the,
Let me.
Go ahead.
Add on that a little bit. And we have talked about this previously. So there again, I agree with everything that's been said.
well, that's good.
And that is, it's a preliminary set of plans. So there's got to be enough information, like Brian was mentioning about the utilities, what kind, those things make sense. So you need to have enough information to make an intelligent decision based on all the information. And you put, so let's just say that you would approve with conditions, and there are a whole bunch of conditions that need to be met. So what would happen is that then we come back.
After you've been to the Board of Health, after you've been to
And maybe even
Conservation.
before, depends, sometimes we do that simultaneously,
Okay.
it could be. But, so we're gonna take your conditions, and now we have to include those in the plans. That may include to get some information from the Concom and the Board of Health. We then come back with a set of plans, and we say, we think we have met all of these conditions, here is our final set of plans. You then still have Brian to review the final set of plans to be sure they're in compliance with all of the terms and conditions of the permit. So that's what Chris was saying, you get we call it a second bite at the plans, to be sure that it conforms with the decision. So a lot of the information, in my opinion, that Brian is asking for, not all of it, but some of it, would really come out in the final set of plans.
So after we finish this process where we either grant or reject, you finalize your plans, you then, apply for another petition to grant the 40B again?
No, that's part of the process. We don't come back. and-
No, okay, so it's just
Usually they just come back that you have to confirm at some point. Usually when I do them, it'll be through a building inspector, is that when they finally reach the point that they're seeking building permits, they have a final set of plans. The board will typically have the right to make sure that those final plans are in conformance with the approval of conditions, so that they can't substantially deviate. And if they do, they have to come back with a project change. But your whole process is done by then. The only thing that you're certifying then is you're reviewing it and you're saying, oh, yes, this is consistent with our
Yes.
conditions.
But they would
of
come
approval.
back to us in a public
But-
hearing, because everything we
It's
do is.
not a public hearing. It would be a public meeting. It is not a hearing.
Oh, well, I mean, it's still, all right, it's an open meeting like this.
It's an open meeting like this.
Yes.
But,
But
and
the-
again, it's typically done through, the ZBA doesn't have the technical expertise
Yes.
to look at that. So
Yes.
you'd either have your building inspector in conjunction with a peer reviewer, either the one that you're using or one that the building inspector typically uses, and he or she then relies on that peer review to make sure that the final plans conform. And that really, though, goes to the building permit process. It has nothing to do with your jurisdiction and your authority over this. This is it. So whenever this public hearing closes,
Yes. But then I would assume that after we get in an open meeting, your final plans, and we have our people review it and whatever, still there's a final output of that. I assume that the board then writes a letter accepting or,
You endorse the
You
final
endorse it,
plan
the final
set.
plans.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be
Yeah.
a paperwork
It's the
trail.
And
endorsement.
that's what gets recorded.
but you can't revisit issues that you
Right.
might have missed during the
If
public
we,
hearing.
if we granted something before, it's still granted.
Exactly.
Right, the waivers, yes.
Okay, I just want to get the process clear in my mind.
Yeah.
I have one question related to that. When they go to the Conservation and to the Board of Health and/or the Board of Health, is either one of those a public hearing, or is it just administrative?
Public hearing.
Yes, definitely for the Concom. I don't know if the septic system works permit is a public hearing, but yes, they're open to the public, yep.
Concom is definitely a public hearing, notice.
Yes, for
public
sure,
hearing.
yeah. So I do, and I really want to try to crystallize the issues or distill the issues. The soil, what comes out of this meeting, because we are planning to do some soil testing, I think it'd be important for the board to hear from Farland why their experience tells them that they need to design this site for sandy loam. And so I'll turn it over to Farland Engineering, who can maybe describe that March 28th plan revision and start with the theory behind the stormwater management system.
And you have those plans.
Yes.
correct?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Christian Fallon, Principal Engineer and President of Fallon Corp. I'm just going to touch base on the soil classification, and then I'll have John go over the remaining issues that were addressed. So the difference basically is whether the material there is sandy loam or loomy sand. I just want to remind the board that the stormwater design was previously designed by a local engineer, which was SciTech Engineering. They had got bought out by CEC Engineering. They also reviewed the design. The plans were stamped by a competent engineer. The plans stormwater review was reviewed by another local engineer, Field Engineering. They did the review of the stormwater, and their stormwater, same soils, was designed and approved, signed off by 2 engineers. I'm a lifelong resident of New Bedford. I now live in Dartmouth. I've done a lot of soil testing throughout my career, and I know firsthand Westport, very rarely will you find some A and B soils. Now, I'm the one stamping this plan. I'm going to be the one responsible for the drainage design. I need to make sure it works. And being familiar with the area, being familiar with how close these basins are to the wetlands, how close groundwater is, which is 4 feet deep. And the research that we did when we got involved in this project, we researched all the septic designs in the area abutting the property and on the street, and 90% of the soils were indeed sandy loam. Now, those were all, majority soils were done by local engineers. And I don't want to put this young engineer down. Well, he's not fully an engineer yet, he's an engineer in training. But he was fresh out of school. And owning my business, my young engineers, I go out there with them doing soils because the only experience they have is a course at UMass Amherst. And that course is strictly in regards to soils. Doesn't get involved with drainage design and how important the classification is to determine if you can infiltrate or detain soils. So as owner of my company, I go out with my young engineers and certainly make sure they understand the difference of a sandy loam and a loomy sand. And I'm going to be honest with you, doing these soils in August, when Mr. Tortola did it, it makes it even more difficult because the soil's dry. So if he doesn't do the proper test to be able to determine between sandy loam and loomy sand, if it's just dry, if he doesn't wet it, it's going to feel like, indeed, a loomy sand. So even though those test pits, he classified them as a loomy sand, the engineer of record, the competent engineer, determined he's still going to use C&D soils. So I just wanted to make sure the board is aware of that. I certainly understand.
Are you doing more test pits?
So we're going to do more test pits, and I think that's a great idea, because I think we just need to put this to bed. And we want to make sure it's designed properly. And if we can infiltrate, if we find B soils out there, or if we can find A soils, so be it. We will redesign it according to the mass regulations, but I will be shocked if we do. So we can plan on going out there. I recommend this gets reviewed by the Board of Health. That's the typical procedure in town. I don't think the consultant needs to be there. I don't think my client needs to pay the town and a consultant to be out there, but I'll leave that up to you, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to just, there's a little conflict information given to the board. The tests within the basins were not witnessed by the Board of Health. So they were never witnessed. And also in the letter that the Board of Health said, they said they didn't witness them. So there were no perk tests done within these basins. So we just want to make sure that's on record. So we have no problem going out there. But again, I just want to let the board know, I'm going to be the one stamping this plan. And if I go out there and there's sandy loam, the design's going to stand as is. The basins are larger because it's Westport. The soils aren't good out here. So if we make these basins smaller, it's a more chance that they're going to fill up and they're going to fail. And that becomes a public health issue. And certainly, and I can say this is the truth, I've designed many basins and I've never had one have issues with it. So I don't want this to, a consultant tell me how to design my system. So we just want to, again, go out there and verify the soils. And the applicant has no problem doing that. We can get out there as soon as the Board of Health gives us a date to witness them. I think that's all I had on the soils.
What about the reserve?
So the reserve area, the applicant owns 117 acres out here. I'm not too concerned.
I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about the reserve area of the septic system.
The reserve for septic?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Do
talking
you
about.
want to hold the septic to the end of the conversation?
can-
It's up to the chairman.
We can talk about the septic if you want. Again, this is going to be a Board of Health.
Well, I know there was a lot of comments,
If-
though, from our consultant.
Yeah,
That there wasn't testing on the reserve for
he
this.
did. He conflicted himself. He said at first the Board of Health witnessed testing out there and it was a perk rate of 8 minutes per inch. but now he's saying that there's no perk test. Either way, we have 2 areas, this is planned. The plan set, this is a 75% plan set, they're not fully construction drawings yet. Certainly, if we have to meet state requirements. State requirements require perk tests in the reserve area. We don't have any perk tests in the reserve area yet, so we're going to have to get that done
Okay.
for the septic area. Either case, I'm not concerned with getting that done, but certainly it's on our list to do.
What's the timing on all this?
The timing on the septic design?
No, the test pits and soil samples.
The
and-
test pits for the septic design we'll probably do most likely in July.
That's after, isn't that after we're supposed to either approve or deny the
Right now, we
plans?
are scheduled, our end date is sometime in June.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, the soil testing for the stormwater design, we're going to expedite and do that sooner because it's a macro issue and a gating issue for the overall design. Since we have to do the soil testing for state compliance, for Title V, that has to be done anyway. That's not something that we would do pre-permit. If,
Because the health department is going to review Title V requirements. for-
correct, correct.
Okay,
So that would be a condition of the permit.
right,
That we
Getting
come-
approval from the Board of Health.
right. Okay,
Yep, so that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If you would like, we can go over the list. But again, I think a lot of the stuff is stuff that we will be adding on the plan on the final set, such as, you know, the registry block, absolutely, that's something we have to do. That's not gonna, you know, I'm not sure if you care if there's a block on the plan. Or same thing, you know, with certain aspects of the plan that need to be finalized. As far as the utilities go, the Eversource is the one that provides the final design of private utilities. We'll handle the ones that are gonna be for our development, which is the water, the sewer, the drainage. As far as the electric goes, I'm not sure if the board cares, if it's on the right side or the left side. It's a line on the plan. We don't have the exact yet. We could put it approximately if you would like, but it's really just a line on the
Are they going
plan.
to handle the electric and the phone and the
Yeah.
cable and
Yep.
whatever?
Yeah, it all gets designed
Yeah,
together.
generally, Mr. Chairman, if I could, on the issue of utilities, it usually comes up on a super tight site, and the reviewing engineer will say, can you show me that you even have the room to get this stuff in there? I think if there's any indication, Brian, that you've seen, is there any indication that there's not enough room to get, water, the water, electric, and cable out there? Is that a concern?
Water is not an issue, it's wells on each lot. So the only thing that's really gonna be in the roadway is drainage and, the force main and some of the sewer, there's gravity. So the water for each lot is provided by a well, not a public water supply. But I do think, where Christian just mentioned that they wanna wait until July to do test pits and soil evaluation and perks for the septic system, we need to make sure that the site is viable to be able to use those as a reserve area. That should be something that's required now, not
No,
later.
No,
that's
I-
a condition of the permit.
Yeah, I would
That's a condition
strongly
of the permit.
disagree with
It doesn't make
that.
sense to do it now.
That's a basic one.
And if for some reason, it's a condition of the permit, and if for some reason there's a problem, then, and we have to make changes, then we would have to, the process is, we would have to come back to the board and say, this is what we need to change on the plan, and we ask for your approval. You have to make a determination whether that change is substantial or insubstantial, and if you determine it's substantial, there's a hearing about that particular issue.
Yeah, and just to clarify a little more, so us volunteering to go out on the site to do the soil testing for the stormwater is actually something I wouldn't ordinarily see in this context. I think the peer reviewer has made or raised such a concern about it, and because we do have seemingly conflicting information, we determined that, and this board is very in tune with the details of the engineering, and, you know, every board's different. I mean, there are boards that would look at it and say, hey, that's great, go for it. But because we're in tune with the details here and this conflict has been raised, then we're making an exception in this case to say, listen, it's appropriate to go back out and resolve this conflict because there is conflicting information. But for something like, you know, complying with the state, we don't actually have to prove final compliance with Title V. We just have to show that we have enough area to put the box out there where the reserve system will go, where the actual main system will go, and then that permitting happens later. And if there is a problem later, then we'd have to come back to the board, but that's not something that we would delay the whole process for. But we can get out there and do these C and D versus A and B, because that's something that came up that is a conflict and it's specific.
So back though on the electric and the whatever. Personally, I would like to at least see a concept of how this is gonna happen. If for no other reason that it doesn't get lost from our standpoint.
Yeah.
You know, I assume that how this is going to run all the power to all these houses is gonna be in the final drawing.
Well, actually, no, not even, because Eversource brings it in, or the telephone company, or Verizon. There's no gas on the site, so that we don't have to worry about the gas system. But generally, what you do is you show us, even on the endorsed plan, you'll show a corridor. If it's a super tight site, and the corridor raises additional concerns, then we'd get some detail in there. But I think, you know, Christian, just to show a corridor for utilities and general, you know, schematic proposal wouldn't be prohibitive, right?
No, I mean, the right-of-way here is 40 feet, which is typical right-of-way standard. We're not looking for a waiver on the width of the right-of-way, so there's more than adequate space to put a utilities.
The electric company won't even begin to look at the plans till they know it's been approved. That's when they do their engineering.
And then what they'll do is they'll come out and they'll put it somewhere else. Had that happen with a transformer recently, put it right in the front lawn. And yeah, they'll put it wherever they want. So it's tricky.
Attorney Pucci, that's generally the way this works? I mean, I know
Fine with that.
power companies tend to do whatever the hell they
Yeah,
want.
I wouldn't waste too much time of your public hearing talking about,
Power.
yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Is there any
So,
other
John, do you
questions,
wanna-
Mr. Chairman? Any other questions?
No, that's not for me.
John, do you want to just give a quick update, you know, some of the additional detail you added, you know, maybe comment on the turning radius? That was something that had come up at the last hearing for equipment and the standards for the planning board on those topics.
Good evening, John Marchand from Farland Corp. I appreciate Mr. Dunn going through all the comments and kind of going through an itemized list of those. I think we addressed a lot of the comments, just providing the PLS stamp on a lot of the plans and updating the waiver list. We did add a note referencing that we had used LiDAR for the abutting topography. We provided additional detail on the erosion control and sediment, erosion and sediment control plans, provided some notes on that plan. We did provide some additional roadway geometry, centerline radius, curb radius at the intersections. We had reached out to the fire department to kind of get some information on the largest vehicle that they would need to navigate through the site. And they just gave us, they didn't give us any dimensions or anything with the truck. They just gave us the design requirements for curb radius, which is implemented into the plan. As Mr. Dunn had mentioned, there were, we added some radii at the additional parking areas. provided some additional notes that were missing on the sewer inverts. I understand he hasn't had a chance to do a comprehensive review on the revisions, but I think he had mentioned looking for additional, the layout plans to include the remaining land. We can certainly do that. We can certainly provide street signs and stop signs. One thing I did want to touch on with the septic, we're not requesting any waiver for nitrogen removal. We have microfast systems at each lot. So I don't know where the blanket waiver came from, but we're certainly not requesting that. We are requesting the waiver from the local requirement for the 30-minute perk rate. I think that's about it.
John, can you also show, the board had raised the question about the 4 or 5 houses up at the top where their wells are located, the distance from our property.
John, can you just call out which sheet that is?
20 of 27.
So we have, on each of our proposed wells, we have a 50-foot circle. That's to demonstrate that we're meeting the well setback requirement from our proposed tanks on our lots. We also have a 100-foot buffer shown extending onto the abutting lots to the north and showing that we are not within 100 feet of abutting septics with our proposed wells.
So how does the sewage get from all the individual lots down to the common septic? It looks like it's gonna have to cross some wetlands to get there.
Well, there's a wetland, the road goes through a, it's
Corridor.
not a wetland crossing, it's
Yeah.
it's an upland.
Right, but,
And
but the house over to the extreme left, how does that pipe get all the way over there without going through the wetland in
So,
the middle here?
Everything comes down this road to a pump chamber in the
Okay.
cul-de-sac, and that pumps it back up toward the septic system near Westport Lakes Road.
Okay,
So
so
it's all gravity fed or pumped down the street that goes left to right.
Yep.
And then down the main street.
and then you're pumping it from the,
In some places there's a pump, some places there isn't, some places.
depending
gravity, so-
upon whether the gravity would do it
So
or
it's
not.
going along the road.
Along the road, in
And
the
then
road.
down
Just-
the-
Just like a sewer. So what happens, every house has a tank,
Right,
and that's what John was talking about, making it.
so some of the tanks are,
nitrogen-
okay.
Nitrogen sensitive removal and all that business, so there's a tank. So everything goes into the tank, right?
Yep.
And then the liquids, like a sewer, go down the pipes in the road that all feed to the common septic area. So just think it look like a sewer system. Instead of going into the sewer manhole, it goes into the.
So each of them have their own tanks.
Each
but
house,
the-
each house has their own
But
tank.
with the, when the septic has
For
the
the
tank,
solids.
there are 2 tanks, the one tank with the solids and then the liquids go over here, so.
No, the liquids go into a pipe.
Right, so I'm just saying in a typical system, in one
Yes,
piece of property,
yes,
there's
yeah,
2
leaching
tanks,
area.
there's 2 tanks.
Right, that's
The
right.
one has the solids, then you get the liquids, and then it goes to leaching area. So
Right.
here, each will have their own solid tank, and
But
then
no
once.
leaching.
But no leaching, and then once it gets liquidy,
Right.
it goes down the pipes into the leaching
Into
zone,
leaching,
okay,
into a common leaching area.
yeah.
So all the houses are gonna, the tanks are gonna drain down to the left?
Yep. And there's a-
Some are pumped, some are gravity because of wherever
Well,
gravity can do it.
All the houses are gravity, all the houses are gravity
All the houses are gravity, but
to
you
the
just,
pump chamber.
and you pump it to there,
And then from here, this gets pumped all the way to the leaching
to the
field.
leaching, okay.
And all the piping is within the road.
All piping is in the road. Okay.
And
So there's no piping in the wetland.
and you just stated that you're not gonna ask, that you don't need a waiver for D-night.
The
Not
only,
for the state, but for
Not
the,
for
they're
the
asking
state.
for their, our town regulation, that's more strict.
No, we're not asking for a waiver. Your bylaw calls for a nitrogen. I could have it
D-nite
wrong,
system.
Nitrogen sensitive removal system. So they're accomplishing that. John, you'll have to explain.
We meet it in the state and it wouldn't be required in the state here. The requirement is.
Right, it's in the
So
town.
how are you complying
We're
with
in
that?
compliance with it, just by having the fast tanks at each individual house.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we're now in receipt of this correspondence from the Board of Health. And as I mentioned early on, the plans and the waiver list evolve. We had called out a few specific sections in our most recent waiver list, but that will continue to evolve. And we spoke this afternoon, and we're going to be able to call those out specifically, and so that the board can see precisely what we're asking for a waiver from, and we'll drill down in more detail. Because as we look at it closer, we might not need waivers, and that's what we discussed this afternoon. We actually.
Even if you do, then we go back to the health department and identify, what are the
You could.
issues with either granting or rejecting your waiver.
You could
If
ask,
deny a waiver, then we have to comply.
Right.
yeah, and we'll specify which waivers we're requesting, and the Board of Health is allowed to give input to this board.
Right, for the local requirements.
Roger, that's just a little simplistic though, because typically what happens is there'll be an appeal. The
Well,
fact that you deny the waiver doesn't mean that they'll comply. It means that probably they'll appeal.
right, well, right,
Just-
okay, right.
And they appeal to
So what
the
we will,
state?
so,
To the Housing Appeals Committee.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's, it's always best to avoid that situation, and we're going to spell out precisely what we
I just didn't want
need.
to make you
Yes.
think that, oh, well, we'll just deny it and you'll
it's, I
comply.
mean, we've been through appeals before, so we know how that, but this is going to be a little different, because this would be, let's just suppose we granted, but we grant with conditions.
Yep.
So you say, oh, well, we granted, how can you appeal a granting? Well, you can always appeal the condition.
Absolutely.
Right. And certainly, part of the process is we generally, and the board indicates which bylaws are important to them and which conditions they may impose, and we would, have hearings to discuss and negotiate, what conditions may or may not be appropriate, and would give the board a chance to have that dialogue in a public hearing, obviously, as we move along in the process.
It's our client's concern and so forth, and our concern. The last thing we want to do is file with the Housing Appeals Committee, because it's going to cost us both a lot of money. And the issue is time, and it's all sensitive. So we want to we came here with the idea of trying to work together, and that's really our intent.
Right.
To work together through the whole process, just as we did in a 91 lot subdivision that we did in Westport, that you haven't, I don't think you got one complaint.
Now, I'm just looking at schedule-wise from here out, because right now, we are scheduled by law to, without an extension, to wrap this up in the middle of June sometime. That leaves us maybe 2 more hearings, if we do this once a month, because we could,
We could meet more often,
We
depending
could
on where
meet
we
more
are with the
often.
plans and that sort of thing.
yes. I mean, I'm certainly, and I've looked at the list, there's a long list of waivers you're asking for, although they are going to evolve, as you said. Are they going to evolve enough in the next month to make the next hearing something meaningful?
I would believe so. We've gotten quite a bit of progress in the peer review, and we'll be able to resolve that soil disconnect question in the month of April.
You're going to be doing more soil sample testing, and you're planning on doing that in April. Well,
We're already we're
that's,
Yeah, and that.
in April.
we're in April, right?
Right.
So-
And I guess the point of the testing is just to confirm what's already on the plan. So we would essentially say our design has been validated.
Yes, and if not, then.
And if not, then we,
Extension would be.
yeah, we would have to, we'd have to do some redesign that would definitely take additional time.
And let me just add one thing, Chris, if I may. On the waiver list, we try to identify by line item everything that we're asking for. But at the end of the day, we need the waivers that are necessary to build the plan as approved by the board. So, so that's what we're asking for. So, in my opinion, you don't, in my opinion, you don't need a waiver list because you're approving the plans.
Well-
But to be safe, we have the waiver list.
Yes, I mean,
So
the
it's kind
waiver
of a
list tells,
combination of both,
but the waiver list tells us things that you are not going to comply,
Yes,
and that's what a
that's
waiver
right,
is.
that's correct.
And we need to understand that.
Sure.
So that we can sign off, otherwise, we're all left in the dark.
Yeah, we're gonna give you that list.
Kind of like saying that the list is this long, and we're throwing it on the walls to see what sticks. Pretty much. Which ones we're gonna
Well,
say yes or no.
I'll tell you, we do kind of start there, because it depends on how much detail the board wants to go. We don't know the board's level of detail, and that's why it evolves. There are boards that say, plan looks good, take a waiver from everything. Obviously, this board doesn't operate that way, and we're identifying specifics as we go. And we just identified a few more that we can comply with this afternoon, so we can be more specific on those topics as well.
Now, does your schedule of having to go to the Board of Health and work with them, and the Conservation Commission with a public hearing, which has to be noticed and so forth, does that accommodate June schedule?
That's actually after, the permit's good for 3 years. And
Do it anytime,
we have a 3-year period from the date the permit's granted to pull all that stuff together. And that's assuming no appeals either one way or the other. But yeah, that's all post-permit.
another question I have is there any, in a project like this, is there any enforcement mechanism for the proper maintenance, pumping of septic tanks?
So generally, with the final plan set, and as a condition of approval, there's usually an operations and maintenance plan, which a lot of times is baked into, so it's not here yet, but as a final plan requirement, it would be to have an operations and maintenance plan that describes what the sequential maintenance is and regular maintenance.
But these are individually owned properties, so.
But there's an HOA as well. So the HOA,
HOA has
owns
to do it
the-
if they do their job.
correct, yeah.
Well, there's also, what happens is that when we start selling the affordables and the market rate units, there have to be disclosures to the buyers. And there's an HOA, and there's a budget within the HOA, and there's money in that budget for update, but maintenance of that common septic system. There are things, according to Title V, that have to be done, and the Board of Health inspections and that sort of thing, if there needs to be any repairs. So there's money in the HOA budget. So every time we close a house, the money from the buyer, so many months, and so there's a fund
Yeah.
for that, and that's
Does
also
that
required in the
include
Fannie Mae and
pumping
Freddie
their
Mac.
own tank?
I'm sorry?
Does that include pumping their own tank, or just a common?
The own tank is their responsibility.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so
Right.
there's really no enforcement of that.
No more than the Board of Health. I mean, how many times do you have yours pumped out? Or how many times do I have mine pumped out? I don't know. I'm supposed
Every
to-
other year,
Right.
You have it done every year?
every other.
Oh, okay. Some people say it's supposed to be done every year. It depends on
Yeah.
how many people are in the house. It depends on a lot
That's what I'm
of, so
saying,
that's
but
up to the individual
There is
person.
no enforcement.
That's
on-
correct.
Okay.
I guess the Board of Health has, at some point in time, would have the right to enforce, to be sure that, you know, everything's on overflowing.
Yeah, it's a Title V
and stuff like
requirement.
that, right. Through Title V, yeah.
I just want to, check with Brian. When we do these test bits, I would, as a board member, I would, by myself, I mean, I'm just one vote, I would think that our peer review should be there at this. I mean, Mr. Fallon said he didn't want it there, but the Board of Health's going to be there, and I, this is a big issue. I mean, it's the one that needs to get resolved. So my opinion would be have our peer review there when they do it.
Do we also need, in that case, the Board of Health to take both? I mean, it seems redundant to me. You've got two soil professionals looking at the same thing, so what, I mean, it's, obviously it's your call, but.
So the Board of Health, I wouldn't call a soil professional, or do they bring their own folks with them?
Their own soil. I'm just saying that this thing's been an issue right
So
from
the-
day, well, it's been an issue, and I just want to hear it from our peer review, yes, this is okay to do. That's why we're paying them.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
we've
paying.
got-
They're paying.
You're not paying.
That's why he's here.
I mean, I agree with Ray.
I would also agree with that.
Is there anything else we can tackle tonight besides scheduling the next meeting and deciding what the next meeting is going to entail?
I think, so, I guess the board has indicated that it's the board's prerogative, they would like a certified soil examiner from MBL to be present. Is that what we're being asked of? Is that what's being
I
asked of
guess
us?
they had a majority already say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, Brian, you could have one certified soil examiner? Okay, great. So we can make arrangements for that. So I think that's settled, we'll get that done. You know, similar to what we did at the last hearing, if the board has anything specific in their minds that they would like more information on as the plan continues to evolve and the issues are narrowed, you know, we had a good discussion at the last hearing about emergency vehicles and wells, and we were able to gather information and cross those concerns off the list. I assume we're going to update the waiver list again between now and the next hearing, and in that, we may have more detailed requests for waivers or no request for a waiver from the Board of Health bylaw. And I think, you know, it was mentioned, the only waiver that we have our eye on right now is the 30-minute perk. Is a local requirement. And I'll caveat that with, oftentimes there are sort of administrative provisions in the local bylaw that mirror or are slightly different from the state. So we usually ask for waivers from the administrative, but we'll be specific about that. You know, it'll say, thou shalt apply, you know, on a Tuesday type thing, you know, so we'll call those details out. But maybe if we just had a quick discussion about that one point that John brought up, so that the board can express concerns or questions, and then maybe we can provide more info on that topic at the next hearing.
Yeah, I think there was, it was brought up in the Board of Health letter, and I think Brian had mentioned it. There's in the subdivision regulations, 3B, 3P, there's a requirement to do perk tests are to be conducted as outlined in Regulation 14. I think that's an older Board of Health regulation. There is no Regulation 14. That's why we're requesting the waiver from it. We're not trying to not do perk tests. But that's a subdivision regulation. As far as the Board of Health regulations, we were requesting a waiver from the 30-minute perk rate requirement. And the Board of Health, I guess, is the issuing authority for the...
So can you describe, though, what a waiver for a 30-minute perk test means?
So the maximum allowable perk rate in town is 30 minutes per inch.
So
The
rather
state-
than what?
The Title V requirement is 60 minutes,
Is what?
60 minutes per inch.
Okay.
So, The Board of Health is also the granting authority for the stormwater quality and quantity control regulations. We're asking for a waiver from that.
Roger, that's
Where the-
one that, sorry to interrupt, but that's one then you'd want to look at, because it's appropriate to seek the waiver for the procedural requirement. You don't have the right to send them to another board for a local regulation. You need to understand what the substantive requirement is, so that
Right,
you
right.
can act on it.
Right, because it's a local requirement, and we're going to be the decision authority for local requirements. Correct, okay.
Yeah, so we were just asking for a waiver from the requirement to submit the stormwater review to the Board of Health as it's being reviewed as part of this ZBA approval process.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make it known that we do have a member of the Board of Health in the audience here tonight. She's here not to discuss detail of any of this, but she is here, and I think we should recognize that. And she specifically indicated to me that she is here in case there are any questions regarding the latest letter from the Board of Health Director. So I'm just wanting to let you know that.
Are we going to read that in the record? Are we reading the Board of Health record?
No, I mean, we have,
I think your
Ton of
questions to
paperwork.
Board of Health will probably come after the applicant specifies what their response is to
Right.
this list. Is there, I might have missed it, I apologize. Is there like a spreadsheet of all the waivers or, you know?
So we haven't built it as a spreadsheet yet.
It's just a list.
It's the list that was
Okay.
included with the March
Okay.
28th Farland
Oh, okay.
Corp. and on April 2nd. But we actually talked this afternoon about putting it into a spreadsheet that you're probably more familiar with seeing.
It's just helpful, you know.
Yep, it's not a heavy lift. We can take care of that.
One of the comments, you just asked if there was anything we could talk about now. One of the comments Brian made was the fire retention pond, or basins, that they were either fiberglass or concrete, and they're depicted as concrete, is that?
Yeah, on the plans, they're
And-
concrete.
and I would just like to have a letter from the fire department saying that that's okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, again, Christian Fallon, for the record. One of the first things I did is meet with the fire chief to go over this project. And the turnaround and the tank was exactly the ones that he wanted. The turnaround was, he gave us a standard that we needed to meet, and we met that standard. And the tank was exactly the same tank that the town likes to see, which is actually made in a Bristol County precast. So I just want to let that, you guys have already on record his approval. So I don't know what else you guys,
Yep, okay.
Well, his approval was for concrete, is that?
yeah, yep.
We don't have a copy of that letter or the fire department's approval.
Is there an email or something?
No, it's part of record. You guys have it.
Oh, there is, okay.
Yeah, it's part of the
even better
record.
than that.
Yep,
All
yeah.
right, so it's already in there, great.
It was read in one of the first hearings we had.
Yep.
We'll dig it up and resend it if you don't have it.
Getting old.
Okay, I'm going to regress just a little bit. On the previous one, we talked about the traffic study, safety aspects of this. And I think we've closed off most of those issues. One thing still concerns me, and it sounds mundane, but from a safety standpoint, this is a private road, as is all the other houses that are there. And, I mean, I drive by this every day, and I see all those mailboxes. Well, right now, there's only 5, because there's only 5 houses there. I'm really worried to see 38 more mailboxes just all along on the road, since the post office won't go on that street. I know, like in Forest Park up here, oh, back there, they have the same thing, but they have a coordinated, they have an area.
Yep.
Like, that
Yeah.
makes it so that when the post office goes there, they just go bang, 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 and you're done.
Yeah.
And you don't have, and again, I'm thinking this mostly from a safety standpoint
Right.
of, so is there any thought about how to do this?
That's actually not an uncommon question that you're raising. I think it's something that we can look at and provide the board an answer with our best guess on that. I mean, ultimately, the
I mean, I
US
know it maybe put you in a bind because you don't own that property.
Exactly, that's the issue on.
Mr.
And I don't know how other areas have done that. I mean, it's a concern to me, but I don't know how to.
Yeah,
I don't-
if
I don't
Mr.
know how to fix it.
Well,
I
hold
think what we'll
on.
do is
Christian
contact
has a, but I think Christian
Yeah,
has a.
we actually do have a centralized mailbox location on the plan, if you want me to show you.
Okay.
But I think that location, Christian, is on West Pole Lakes Road? No.
So it is on the plan. Yeah, I thought,
It is, I must have missed it, because I didn't. No, they said it's not on.
I thought that that was the 2 parking spaces with the little concrete pad was the centralized mailbox.
The post office,
They won't go in there.
they won't go there.
They don't.
Yeah, well, that's,
So we'd have to get out onto Westport Lakes Road, we'd have to work with the present owner, see if we could come to some.
Right, because it's going to have to be on the intersection of 177 and Westport Lake Road, because that's,
I think so.
because
They're not gonna
because
go
they
into
can't go
the-
down Westport Lake Road.
They could, but they won't.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, anyway, it's just, you know, I sort of brought, we talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, and I can just see, you know, 38 more mail, I mean, it's just going to be a disaster.
I just see a lot of cars waiting, parked along the road to get to their mail. And the same thing, I think we had the same concern with the school bus.
With the school bus, right, right. But at least this one we could manage if, you know,
Yeah.
if there was
We
a.
had contacted a landscape architect to take a look at that, and that's where he came up with the plan. He thought that they would go into the subdivision, but since then, we found that most likely they will not. So I don't know whether you could have, I don't like personally to have whatever it is, 38, 45, I don't know, 50 mailboxes out there. So I don't know if there's a way that we could maybe come up with some solution where we have like a central.
Right, I mean, if you look, there's one up here on, like I said, right off of 177 that does that.
But it's still it's still gonna be 38 boxes,
And-
it's just gonna be one.
But it's one,
Yeah,
right.
right.
they're
Yeah,
not-
that's right,
It's
assume,
not like,
Right.
yeah, it's not like.
It's like a
no,
bank,
It's not
you know?
it's not 38 boxes, so somebody can come with their baseball bat and knock them all down.
I know that puts you in a bind because you don't own that property,
Right.
but I would like, you
But I
know,
know that the owner.
it's a concern to me.
The owner, I think, is presently cooperating or working with the planning board, and I think that maybe we can have some discussion with them and see if that's something that,
Okay, no.
Yeah, thanks for raising that.
yeah.
Any other,
Is there any more clarity on the wells? Because we keep going back and forth that each plot's gonna have their own well, and then sometimes they may not have their own
So they're
well.
all gonna have their own well.
We're gonna have to.
Okay.
Yep.
Because we've been gone, every once in a while.
And
we
then
get-
they show
That's
that,
gonna go through the board of health
and
as
they have to
well.
be 50 feet from the house and 100 feet from the
And we
closest
just
septic.
showed you the plan
And
that
I
that
just
does
went
that,
through that.
right?
Right. Yep. Okay, if there's no, first of all, let's talk about what we will do at the next hearing. I assume we can wrap up some of, you'll have had time to go through, and our consultant will have had time to go through what your most update is.
yes, so.
And sort of wrap that up as much as we can.
Right. That's definitely, the plan would be for, I guess, actually, so MBL received the March 28th plan set that answered the March 18th comments. So the next iteration would be a new review from MBL based on the March 28th. But I do think, Mr. Chairman, and you know, I'd like input from town council as well, some of the comments seemed a little granular, that at this point, it might be appropriate to, and actually, they're going to be out there, or the certified soil examiner is going to be out there for the soil test anyway, so they'll need to cooperate and coordinate the soil test timing. So I was just wondering if, to some extent, there'd be some communication between the engineers directly to try to, you know, make sure we fully understand the open comments. Because I looked at this, and Mr. Farland looked at this, and a lot of these seem to have answers, and, you know, based on the initial reaction from Brian, it seemed like he had a couple extra questions. So I think that would be an appropriate path to try to expedite MBL's next turn.
You want to do a one-on-one.
Or at least, I think we made clear at the last hearing, and town council made clear that he didn't want a free-for-all, which we respected.
Correct.
But I think, you know, at this point, allowing MBL or authorizing MBL to ask questions and at least have a conference call to try to work through anything that might be open from an engineering perspective that's in this report, so that MBL can expedite their next turn.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see a problem with that. We do that all the time.
Yeah,
But if you'd like a member
Well,
of the
I'm-
board,
I'm-
or if you'd like,
looking at-
Yeah, no, if he thinks it would be useful, the peer reviewer, I don't mind it at this stage. I mean, because we are getting into the process.
Right,
So
okay.
So with,
he will want to report back.
Yeah, but
that
event,
we
but
spoke
right,
on
after
such
you
and
do
such.
your, then we'll get something back from our consultant saying, here's now my stand, and here are still my open issues.
right, exactly. And then that would be, similar to what we did tonight, that would be ideally, actually, if we look at the timeline, see when the board has available for a hearing, if we could back plan from that to hopefully maybe get
You don't have anything
MBL's.
scheduled, right? Yeah. You have nothing scheduled.
So if we could,
if I may, point of order, Mr. Chairman, I think what's paramount is, first, we need to schedule the test pits. Determine what the soil group classification is.
Right,
That either the plan stays as it is.
right.
Or they go back into design.
right.
My gut is they're gonna go back into design.
But you won't know that until you do
Right,
it.
exactly. But that's what my gut is right now. Which would be to the benefit of the development, because I think with the infiltration and recharge of those systems, in compliance with the state regulations on stormwater, which they have to, and they have to show recharge.
Right, okay,
Well,
well, you've said this already three,
Right,
four
right, I
times.
did. So that would reduce the basin size, which would reduce the fill and grading and so on and so forth.
Yes,
I think,
okay.
yeah, and I'm hearing this,
But still, so what I mean, in order to have a meaningful, you have to do the test bits, and then we need to, I mean, if it's no harm, no foul, then we go forward. If in fact you need to make a change, then we can talk about it at the next meeting.
well, I think if that actually came to pass, we may continue the next hearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we want to get something done at the next hearing, which would probably go through a lot of the waivers that we know about.
Right, we could do that. So maybe if we look at the timeline, I mean, May, I'm unavailable the 14th. Would the 21st work for?
If we, I was thinking if we can we schedule the test, soil test, this upcoming Monday?
You can schedule
that too
whatever you
soon?
want. I'm not going to be there.
You could be there, you
I-
can fight it.
If somebody from MBL can be there on Monday,
You also need the health department, don't you?
Health Department.
well, that's up to the board if they're gonna,
Yeah, so I just plan to do those whenever you can.
so if the Board of Health can't be there, is it okay if the consultant's there?
I want the Health Department to be there.
Okay, so then we won't,
Coordinate it with both of them.
we'll coordinate that tomorrow then, and hopefully they can both be there on Monday.
Okay, and so that information comes in next week. MBL.
Somebody available.
MBL reviews, continues to review the March 28th submittal. And Brian, assuming that the pits are done the week of the 14th, whenever it is, could you commit to a turn of the next iteration of the peer review by May 2nd?
When am I gonna receive the plan?
You have the plans. It's the March 28th plan
All
set.
right, so, but on the 14th, say the soils are what we say they are. That was already certified at the Board of Health. That means Christian and his staff go into redesign.
Well, hold on. So what we're saying is, we have to operate on the presumption that our lead designer has said that this is the way that he wants it to proceed. The peer review is not going to compel something unless it's clearly fatal to the design. If it's his preference to go forward with that, that'll get resolved the week of the 14th, all right? And if not, there'll just be open comments, and we can discuss it during the next hearing. There's still a lot of other points to cross off the list. So whether they're open or closed on the 14th, can we have a peer review by the 2nd of May?
Based on the information we received on April 3rd or 4th? Yeah. But I think that's spending your money for,
No, I think
For no.
everybody's confused. on the 14th, let's say we do testing, and let's say that it confirms what Christian is saying. So therefore, there's no further redesign, so to speak. So you would be able to, so.
If there's no redesign,
There's no
Ken,
redesign, so we're still staying with the same set of plans.
that you just received, or,
March
Right,
28th,
That he has not yet fully,
the March 28th
and if
plans.
there is a redesign, all bets are off, and we,
yes.
when we reconfigure.
So by May 2nd, and then we have a meeting the week of, whatever, week of the May 5th.
No, what we're saying is, on the 14th, if everything's hunky-dory with the soils, there's, so, I see, yeah, so we gotta get, he's gonna respond to the May 2nd, right, so he can,
He's going to have us a report by May 2nd. No, he's going to have us a report on the March 28th submittal by May 2nd, all other things being equal. So that, let's just plan for that date. So if we did have it by the 2nd, I think we'd probably, would we want a little bit of time between the next submittal and the subsequent?
My problem is,
Hold on.
the problem is if we get something May 2nd, even if it takes us a week, he's not gonna have time to respond by we're trying to meet on May 14th. But either way, I think the rest of his comments, should be pretty minor,
Okay.
as long as the stormwater doesn't change, obviously. So I think we should be able to meet May 7th or May 14th.
Does the board only meet on Wednesday nights?
We generally do, but that's not cast in stone.
Would it be,
Sorry. The week of the 5th is town meeting, so we can't schedule anything.
Oh, right.
okay. Would the 13th work for everybody?
No.
They might have hearings here. We might have to.
Yeah, that's, the reason we stay on Wednesdays is because the room is
Okay.
available. So if we're going to go off the reservation,
We can
we'd
do
have to make
14th, we can
sure.
probably do 15th.
I actually,
Do the 15th.
No, okay.
I can do the
I'm on
14th.
away the 14th and 15th and 16th. So we could do the following Wednesday,
21st?
the 21st. And obviously, we talked about the engineers are going to have some communication between then and now. So, and I think the idea would be to have a robust discussion on the Board of Health waivers that night and any open engineering issues that they were unable to resolve between now and then. So it'll give them plenty of time to have some back and forth if needed. So, Shannon, would you be okay with the 21st? I think does the 21st work for the board?
The board, there's somebody in the audience who wants to speak to that.
No, I'm going to speak to one of the issues. Donna Amaral from the Board of Health. Matt Armendo has been watching, so we've been communicating back and forth. He is available on Monday, or there's someone available on Monday to do any perks. So we just wanted to pass that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Pucci, what's your availability?
I'm available.
Good. Because we're not doing this without you.
Uh-oh.
What about the rest of the board?
21st of May?
21st,
I'm good.
you guys?
I think the 21st is better than the 14th. We need to give everybody enough time
To do their-
so they come in
Hold on.
and we knock this stuff out.
Yes,
Yeah, 21st is fine.
okay. Janice?
Yes, good.
Yes, me, I'm
Point of
okay.
order, Mr. Chairman.
And I will check with Constance.
Mr. Chairman, I think the Monday might be a little bit too fast, because we need a trench permit, we need to call dig safe. We
We get it.
need all that cleared.
It's already good shape there.
Okay. All right,
What time on Monday, the 14th?
No, Wednesday.
Oh, that's the,
different. You and I aren't on that. So we're going to do the 21st, 18:30.
Okay.
10 a.m.?
okay, everybody is okay then with May 21st here at 6:30? Anybody, board, any other discussion for today? Board? No?
Somebody in the audience.
Yes, I'm going to open it up to the audience. Come up and name and address. And again, we confine this to stormwater management. Good. Whoop. And not destroying things.
For the record, Stacy Pereira, 26 Westport Lakes Drive. I have the Westport department that you were discussing earlier. English was not my first language, but I do know how to read. There's nothing on here that says approved. It actually says undetermined. And also, I did reach out to the post office. They will not go down the private street.
Right.
And as it is, the top of Westport Lakes is state-owned. That's it, the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's going to be a challenge.
Brent Pereira, 26 Westport Lakes Drive. I've brought this up in the past, and I think it's prudent because we're talking about conservation and Board of Health. I know the board is aware from some documents that I provided in one of the first and second meetings regarding the history of the entire landmass that includes Westport Lakes Drive, as well as the 40B parcel currently under this proposal. My question is, I've had a hard time getting a distinct answer, is back in the early 2000s, there was a comprehensive process, a review process through MIPA, and at which it enveloped the whole entire landmass. Like I said, Westport Lakes Drive as it is now, as well as the 40B parcel from the proposal. I guess my question is that, and that I have not been able to get an answer, is will this, because the initial project was designed in two phases, where a phase one, which is what Westport Lakes Drive is currently, and then the phase two, which is essentially what they're proposing to do now currently under the 40B. The plan was in effect back in the early 2000s, and it's still essentially in effect now. So nothing has really changed, except for the structure of the project. There was a comprehensive MIPA review, which entailed a number of requirements to include a notice of project change to be identified if the landmass that the 40B is comprised of, if there is any project change or any developmental efforts on that parcel, where MIPA determined that there would have to be a notice of project change filed with MIPA so that they could continue with their review. I guess my question is, at what point does that occur? Because that notice of project change was set into effect back in 2008, according to the final environmental impact report, which I provided to the board previous. Second to that, because of the MIPA review, this whole landmass fell under the Department of Environmental Protection and not local conservation. Not being a professional, I'm assuming that this whole project would still fall under DEP and not local Concom because of what occurred in the past. I've asked a number of professionals this and have not been able to get a straight answer. I guess because part of this process, they have to go to Concom, local Concom, which I understand they have to go to them first, and then it would get pushed off to the DEP, if that's the case. But I just want to make sure that that does occur, or if that's the appropriate avenue, that it does occur. Where this project, under the 40B proposal, would still fall under the superseding order of conditions that was set back in the original project scope. I don't know if any of the professionals here could answer that through the board, where will this 40B project fall under local Concom, or should it, because it was once under DEP, should it not still fall under the DEP envelope and guidance?
I think what he's trying to say is there was a MIPA review of some type of a project that triggered an EIR, which is an Environmental Input Pack Report with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs in Boston. I don't know what that project entails or what triggered that EIR, but usually an EIR and a final EIR means it's a very large project with a lot of land alteration, maybe wetland alteration, number of trips, would trigger something like that on vehicle trips. But I don't know what the full project would have entailed. But I don't know if the applicant is working on that EIR or the basis of that EIR. I couldn't tell you because I haven't seen it. However, but right now, what we have in front of us is a 40B application for one parcel of land. I don't know if that was part of that EIR or not part of that EIR. It may have been, and maybe there is a requirement for a notice of project change at the state level, but the local conservation commission is ultimately the permit granting authority here for any work within the 100-foot buffer zone, and to enforce the stormwater rules and regulations of the state. But if there is a threshold of land alteration, like 25 acres or more, or, whatever it is, more than 500 parking spaces or something like that, that requires an EIR or a draft EIR, or an ENF, an environmental notification form, then the applicant would have to do that. But I don't know what was originally permitted through the Secretary of State, I can tell you.
Yeah, I think what Brian was getting at towards the end of what he was describing there is the accurate takeaway, is that the project has to comply with state law, and there is a process through each state permitting agency to see whether or not that other MEPA process is triggered. So it can be triggered through the Concom process, it could be triggered through another state-issued permit. Last time we talked about any MassDOT approvals. But the answer is, this board does not waive any state requirements. So if there is a state requirement somewhere out there, it will come up in the final review process that will be triggered by one of the agencies that is issuing a state
So when you
permit.
get the Concom, they will,
As the state permitting
representative.
agency, correct. It'll go to them first, and depending on where they end up with it, they will either refer it to MEPA and say that there's some additional threshold that was triggered, which I don't think that would be the case. But again, we're speculating because it's all state law.
The other trigger that popped into my mind is state action. So if there's a state permit, say something out on Route 177, that's an ENF, at least an ENF.
but that'll come up through the Concom process.
It may, I don't know if they would bring that up, but it really should be the applicant's team to say, hey, what other state permits do we need, because we're doing this, we're doing that, da, 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 da. Does it trigger anything?
Right.
But I'll tell you, if there is a state permit required, that requires an ENF. Even if, say, there's an appeal, that's state action, that's an ENF.
Attorney Pucci,
I
any
think
comment
folks
on
are
that?
ruled differently on that particular issue, but one thing I just want to say is, and I think this all relates to what was trying to be permitted years ago, and that was 170, all of the acreage. It included a golf course. It included, I don't know, 50 houses, quite a few houses, I'm not sure the exact number. And that development never went forward. So that development as designed then would have triggered a NEPA review. But ours certainly doesn't. But Chris is right. I mean, whatever the state requires, we'll do.
I don't know the status of the MEPA filing for this. So MEPA is a process where the state will act on standards, and then they will issue a certificate depending on what is filed under MEPA. I haven't reviewed that certificate. I don't know what applies to this property. It's outside your purview, what the status of the MEPA filing, and whether there was a project change on our original certificate, all those types of issues. I can tell you, if it's State Wetlands Protection Act, Conservation Commission acts on it in the first instance, they're the jurisdictional authority. Their review would be subject to appeal to Mass DEP. Again, local rules would be before you, but the MEPA, whatever the status of of the MIPA filings or certificates or the requirements, I have no idea. I've not reviewed any of it, and it really isn't within your purview to determine the status of that. You know, your permit would be subject to any state requirements. They have to comply with that. You know, if people have a real concern about what the MIPA status is, they need to look into that, you know, and seek counsel to look at it if they think that their rights are adversely affected by it, but it's really outside the scope of your review here on the 40B.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then I guess I take it up with Concom then. Thank you.
Yep.
Stacy Pereira, 26 Westport Lakes Drive. I forgot to mention on the Westport Police, I'm sorry, the Westport Fire Department, with the first meeting, the first hearing, the board had requested for someone to be present when they went to the fire department, and that didn't take place, just to let you know. I also, I missed part of the beginning of the meeting. Was anything brought back as far as the traffic study? They were supposed to
No.
come back with reports.
They did answer the questions that were brought up by our consultant as documentation.
Because I guess they had reached out to Westport Police Department and were not able to obtain the accident reports. So did we get that, or?
That I don't know.
Okay.
As far as we know, the traffic is done.
Well, at the last hearing, if anybody needs to go back on the tapes, it was asked, they said they were going to present that. Another thing, as far as the last meeting, I had mentioned that there had been 3 accidents, and Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty sure there was like either minor injury or accident versus major. 2 out of the 3 vehicles were totaled. Thank you.
Thank you.
There was some discussion regarding the area of 177 and Old County by the mobile station. There was some discussion regarding a turn lane or not, and you had thought,
Clearing, I think it was mostly.
yeah, and you had thought that the mobile station was supposed to have done that in their when they were permitted for theirs, but.
I had also asked the last one, there was a lot of discussion as far as 88 coming off the ramp, but I had said that I would think that the majority of the comparison would be more of Mouse Mill Road as far as with that traffic study versus the 177 or the Old County Street that you're speaking of. So I guess the other thing was with the Westport Westport Fire Department. I called and spoke to the deputy chief that there was nobody from the board that was with Farland that got that report from Westport Fire Department. Thank you.
Anything else? Good.
Hi, Joe Pacheco, Grand Pine Way. But the reason I'm up here is, I had a question about the wells. We're gonna be drilling 38 wells?
Yes.
Yes. And what guarantees me that my well's not gonna go dry?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Why would it?
Why wouldn't it? That's all artesian wells.
But it goes into the aquifer.
Excuse me?
They go into the aquifer.
Yeah, but still, we're talking 38 wells in a relatively small area.
Yes. Well, yes.
So I guess I'm stuck drilling for a new one, right? If it goes dry.
I don't think drilling for a new one is,
My well is 168 feet deep.
okay.
How deep are these wells gonna be?
They go until they hit the aquifer.
Exactly.
right?
It could be 168 feet.
It could be 300, could be 500,
Could be, exactly.
yes.
But,
That's how wells are, yes.
so there's nothing I can do,
No.
no? That's nice.
Attorney
Okay.
Blake, I mean, Attorney Pucci?
Well, I mean, he has evidence that it's gonna drain as well, as he's gonna have to pursue that issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all drilling into the same aquifer. Everybody in Westport is in the same aquifer. I mean,
Yeah, but it's all different veins, you know?
and some,
Everybody drill-
and I agree with you that, that some people, they hit the aquifer at 150 feet.
Right.
Some people go to 500 and then still have to frack it afterwards.
Exactly.
That's just it's the regularities of how the aquifer works. It's not, it's not just one big ocean down there that you're tapping into.
So after all these wells I dug, mine goes dry, I'm screwed, right? I have to hire somebody.
They could drill one well and your well could go dry.
Yep.
I mean,
Could
that's,
be
that's
one,
true.
right?
Just the way, that's
I
just
would,
the way it is.
I wouldn't worry if it was one or half a dozen. We're talking
Right.
38,
Yeah, but I'm saying
and
one well could cause your.
they're
well
gonna
go
be
dry.
close to the proximity, right? How far apart are they gonna be?
They, well, they're gonna be 50 feet from the house, and they're gonna be 100 feet from your septic, at least. And I don't know where your well is.
Well, what I'm saying is, the new ones that they're gonna be drilling, how far apart are they gonna be from each other?
They really, I mean, it's gonna vary by a lot.
But pretty close.
On average.
Well, it's just 4 or 5 of those houses, and it's on the plan what the distances
Yeah.
are. I mean, and John had discussed that a little bit, as, I mean, just, Tickle Road, they did 91 of those.
I'm not worried about Tickle Road, I'm worried about where I live,
Yes, yes.
yeah?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so the wells are not 50 feet away from the homes. They're at least 50 feet away from
The
the
septic.
septic tank,
Oh, right, yes. but
not the
it's-
house.
Right. Yes.
I have 11 by 17, but John, can you tell us how far the wells are apart on, say, lots
Especially the
6,
first
7, 8, 9?
4 houses on the, whatever, south side.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, while John's looking up that distance, I just wanted to read into record, put this fire department issue to bed. There was an email sent from Mark A. Brisk, Deputy Fire Chief, Westport Fire Department, to Maria on October 29th, 2024, which includes attachments and also states in the email, "Good morning, Maria. The roadway design and fire protection regulation have been reviewed and approved. If any of the board members have any questions or concerns, please have them contact me directly." Okay, and this is part of the record, I believe.
So we can see that from the 50-foot radiuses that are drawn on here, the tightest, I guess the tightest lot would be lot 3. That well would be a little bit more than 50 feet, lot 2. The others, you can see the wells are, maybe 70, 78.
The houses on the left was, the houses up above, that's, so.
No, I mean, I understand, I mean, I certainly, I understand your concern, but the way the aquifer works, whether they're far or close is not really relevant. You look at all the neighborhoods that we have, even off of 177, and those houses back to back to back to back, everybody has to have a well because we don't have any public water. We all know that. What it really means is you're tapping into the same source of water. We all know that. It was an aquifer that we're all tapping into. So whether the well is 50 feet apart or 4,000 foot apart, it's still the same aquifer that you're pulling the water from. So what you worry is are you really deep enough to really get, where are you in the aquifer? Now, yours is actually pretty lucky. That's actually fairly shallow for a well in Westport.
Well, lucky, it depends on how you look at it.
Look at that, but you hit sustainable water at 160 feet. Okay. The guy next to you, he might have to go 500 feet. It really is a function of how the aquifer underground is actually flowing. So,
And I'm not gonna be a happy camper if this is.
oh yeah, I understand.
All of a sudden,
Yes.
then I have no water, and I'm gonna spend what? 10, 20
But,
grand?
but if you're not going to have any water, then people that are going to be, aren't going to have any water either. Because they're going to be drilling into that same aquifer.
What I'm saying, and
So,
plus, plus you could also look at the water pressure. You're
Same
looking at
thing.
38 more units that are gonna be tapping into that system.
But whether they're here or half a mile apart, we're all working off the same aquifer.
Pressure is regulated by the pressure tank, right?
Well, it's flow rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's flow
Right,
rate.
yeah.
Speculation, really,
get a certain
Roger,
flow.
I mean, the peer reviewer isn't raising an issue about it.
We got the flow.
If there's expert testimony about it, you consider it, but right now, there's no expert testimony before you
Right.
to raise the issue, so it's not really something you can answer
Right.
for them.
Well, I'm not sure that anybody can, because,
Well, that's.
I mean, I know that when I had my well drilled, I mean, we went down like 250 feet. Next door neighbor had to go 500, and he was only 100 feet away. It really depends upon how the irregularities in the aquifer.
That's
And some
really
people
just-
some
yeah.
people have very low flow rate, and some people have very high flow rate in the same area.
It's really just your lay opinion, though, on it.
Yes.
If the property owner is concerned about it, he really has to talk to a well guy.
A well guy,
And-
yes.
And,
Yes.
and then if he has evidence that he wants to bring before you,
Yes.
you should consider it. But you're not at, and I don't minimize the concern, but I'm
Yes.
just saying, you're not at the stage that you can have a meaningful dialogue with him or the
Well,
applicant.
I might as well ask for it before it happens, if it happens.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because
It's just, there's no competent testimony before you that you would base any type of condition on it,
Mm-hmm.
or, so.
Right, other than just, well, everybody has a well, and everybody's well is different. Okay,
I had another question.
okay.
How much fill are you gonna be bringing in for all this property?
How much what?
Phil.
Fill. How high are you gonna go above the existing?
Well, they don't have to put a leaching field in, so you don't have to build up for a leaching field that a lot of times you would have to. So that's a valid question. When you're out there excavating,
All of the cuts and fills are on the plan.
are they?
Correct, Christian? Not all of them?
Yeah, the grading plan shows you all the cuts and fills. We haven't calculated a total, but the goal of an engineer is to try to minimize the amount of fill we need, so it's try to balance the cuts and fills, so it's a balanced site, which obviously is cost-effective. To get a number, we don't have that number, total volume.
Right. Now, since you don't have septic systems associated with it, you don't have to worry about how deep you dig the cellars to get, in order to get the, in order to discharge into a septic system.
Leaching area, right.
So, because your leaching area is way, is pumped to it.
When I had my septic tank put in, my system put in, it was Mr. Lenny Potter that did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that whole area around here is all flooding. He says, I know this area around here like the back of my hand. And every day.
soils?
Hmm?
It's not any soils, will be?
Well, he dug 20 feet down. He dug 20 feet down. He dug 20 feet down, and all he was taking out of there was truckloads and truckloads of clay. And I believe when I put in my system, it was drawn up and it's in the town. 20 feet deep.
Okay, is there a question here? Or just a comment?
My question is, how much fill is it gonna be brought in? And depending on the height, we're gonna have water runoff going towards Grand Pine Way.
Right, I mean, that's, can you address that as far as runoff the other way?
It has to.
Grab the grading plan, just for that back piece. Just so the board's aware, the goal of the engineer and we're required pre-development runoff from the site and post-development runoff for the site. We can't exceed what runs off to his property during the pre-development for the post-development. So after construction, ultimately, there's less water that goes to his site. And that's a requirement, that's a state requirement. I think we just need that one. So this is the grading plan. These are the abutters here. Currently, their land is at 172 here. Our land's at 168. Doesn't take an engineer to figure out the water's.
Water going that way.
Water's coming on our site.
So it's all heading to the east.
So our goal with the development is to make sure that after it's done, we're not pushing water onto their site. So what we have here, and this is rough grading right now. We have locations of houses on here, but it could change. But this gives you a rough idea what the draining, stormwater is doing. We actually have a swale behind all these houses, which defers the water to the pond. So there's no additional water going on to their site after we're done. We also have the tree line shown on this plan, which is, we're not changing any of the grades after that tree line. It's gonna be natural buffer to the abutters as well.
Is the grade from Pine Street heading towards you guys?
From Pine Street, they basically have a ridge, most of them do anyway. Front of their houses go to the street. The rear of the houses either have a swale somewhere in between or go onto our property. A lot of them have septics back there, which I'm sure was a high groundwater, so they may have raised septics. Some of them have pumps, some of them may not have pumps. Groundwater's high, it's 4 feet in this area. It's definitely not e-soils.
Okay, thank you.
My question was, how much soil are you bringing in?
Again, Mr. Chairman, these plans, they're not finalized. We don't do a volume calc for the entire development. I don't know,
But as long as the water is running off in the
it's
other
irrelevant how
direction,
much fill
is there a reason why
we're
you worry
bringing in
about
here.
fill?
You're not gonna raise the grade.
We're not
Would
gonna,
that be a fair assumption?
The
It's 172 feet behind it and
And
168
right
thing.
now, there's 4 feet to work with.
we have a buffer along the entire property. We're not touching the grade. There's not gonna be an ounce of dirt in that buffer zone. So we're not changing the grade along the
Right,
property.
that's, I think, is it better answer the question than how many cubic feet of
Yeah, exactly.
fill you're gonna
Yeah.
put in. You're not
That's really
changing it.
relevant.
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay. Can I ask a question?
I guess, yeah.
This is not your first development. In your previous experience, have you ever dug a bunch of wells like this and caused somebody else's well to go dry?
My experience, I don't know about Kristen, but mine, none. So again, I'm gonna bring up the development I have in Mattapoisett, which lots are smaller than these. We have altogether, if you can quiet the crowd, please. We have over 28 houses there. House lots are 10,000 square feet. We have wells, we have a shared septic system, and we haven't had one issue.
I thought Mattapoisett had public water.
Nope, not our location.
Okay.
Um,
And
when-
some do, right? Some parts of Mattapoisett share with Fairhaven?
Some probably, yeah. Well, that's a good example. Don't have any issues there. Again, this is something that really, it's, you could run into issues. We don't know until we get started out there. Certainly, there's no evidence. They have houses very close together, same wells, no issues there. I don't think this question is really pertinent right now to the board, but we'll answer many questions as.
Well, but he asked the question, so I was trying to
Yeah,
get to your experience.
from our experience, yeah, we haven't had any issues. Yeah. But-
91 on Tickle Road, to my knowledge.
And-
No issue there for the wells.
Question, we keep referring to Tickle Road and Mattapoisett. Can we specify acreage? This was 25 that we're dealing with, right?
38.
38, okay. So my question is just what's the acreage for Tickle Road and then the Mattapoisett that we keep comparing
He
developments?
just said Mattapoisett was smaller than this.
Oh, he said the house,
Acreage.
he said the house lots were smaller. He didn't say the acreage was smaller, right?
Well, doesn't that,
The total acreage of the project
Total
versus,
acreage of the project, we have a large open space parcel there, which is over 30 acres. And then our development was probably close to the same. So, I don't know, that helps.
okay. I'm going to make a motion to continue this hearing until, what do we say, the 21st? At 6:30 here.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Let the record show that's unanimous. So we will see you all, and hopefully we can start closing in on this, because time is running, clock is running. So hopefully we can get through at least a major portion of the water management of this, and go through at least the first draft of whatever waivers you're requesting.
Yes, yep, and we'll plan to have that well in advance as well, and we'll share it
Okay.
with council and the peer reviewer.
Okay?
Thank
We'll
you.
see you all in May. Thank you, George.
You're welcome. Do you have other business?
Just meeting minutes.
Oh, okay. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Okay, meeting minutes. We had a meeting March 26th. Maria wrote up the meeting minutes. This one, I handle a little differently. Because the petitioner wasn't here, I thought it was important to expand upon some sections, to make it obvious what we were doing, because the petitioner wasn't here to, to present his case. So I added a lot of, a little bit more background in it, things that we had discussed, like, I added the letters that had been written so that it became, a little more, a little clearer how we were reacting to somebody who didn't show up, and make that part of public record. So anyway, Maria added all that. I think other people had comments.
Good night, everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
So, so I make a motion to approve the March 22nd, 2025 meeting minutes.
March 26th.
26th, yes. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, that's unanimous. Let me sign this before I forget. Any other, town meeting is coming up May 5th, yeah. I know, I'm going to, the select board is actually going to, on the next Monday, we're going to discuss the articles, the zoning board articles that are going to be on the town
Which
meeting.
meeting?
They want somebody, I'll be there, and I think Jim Whiten will be there as well to discuss what we are, there's 3 articles that are going to go on for zoning. The one which is just the ADU, which is just complying with state law, and two that have to do with short-term rentals, one from a general bylaw standpoint, one from a zoning standpoint. So anyway, that will be next Monday. Any other business that anybody wants to discuss?
Have you heard from the folks from the last meeting? Have they decided to?
No, but if you did see that Ralph sent out another cease and desist letter.
I didn't send that to everybody, I just sent it to
Oh, yeah, Ralph sent another cease and desist letter to formally, to.
They're not operating.
No, they're not.
Just reiterating the first one.
Right.
Same reason.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, they're not operating, so.
Seems to me he did add,
I think there was something he
he
added.
added
Yeah.
a second paragraph or sentence.
Okay, no other,
No.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn the
Adjourn.
meeting.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. That's good.
What time?
Okay, Val, thank you.
On the 5th?